Hello, everybody, and welcome to Championship Week of 2022 Fantasy Football. It has been a wild ride this season, and we're diving straight into the action here for this upcoming week's matchups with 5 must-start running backs here, 5 players that I really like their matchups and outlooks for this week's contests. Of course, everything for the majority of leagues, there is some 2-round playoff formats and even some teams that have week 18 championship weeks, which of course we'll have you covered here on the channel for all of that. But for the vast majority of us, it comes down to this. So some pretty high stakes for this week's games. Let's get into the matchups here and break down why I love these 5 players for week 17. All right, here we go, friends. So it's been a pretty busy week here the past 7 days or so with me constantly traveling from one place to another. Haven't had as much time in the studio here as I would like to get content to you all. Of course, the fear with pre-recording episodes far in advance is that injuries happen, news changes, situations constantly evolve here. So if you're looking for input for me this week, you never know what'll happen. And obviously I'm trying to get out as many videos as I possibly can here. But if you want to have instant updates and reactions from me, make sure you're following me on Twitter at Sizzle Fantasy or have joined our SFS community Discord server. That's been by far the best way to get in touch with me this season, even more so than the comment section and Twitter mentions and whatnot. I'm constantly in there numerous times a day answering gold members' questions, popping in, letting you guys know updates, sending tweet links and whatnot in there. So obviously, again, at Sizzle Fantasy on Twitter, and then, of course, the Discord server, which is linked in the description of today's episode. Travis Etienne, I did want to break through him. This is probably our most obvious one of today's episode. It's not too much of a reach to see why this is such a strong start this week, but I do still want to talk about him. It's kind of this interesting middle ground territory with Etienne where you kind of look at him and think of him as this kind of blue chip player. He has the draft capital, he has the talent, he has all the skills that you really need for success here, but the production hasn't quite aligned and matched up with that. Now, the reason that we are talking through him here, despite the fact that he is coming off of back-to-back double-digit point performances and has 22 and 25 opportunity games consecutively in those respective contests, is that his ceiling just hasn't really been on the table here despite these strong games, or lineup-worthy games, I should say. Strong floor performances is probably the better way to categorize this here. But this is the matchup where in the championship, I've been talking about this for honestly probably a month now. If you could just bite your teeth, get into the playoffs here, and survive with Etienne putting up those floor numbers in these last 2 contests here, you've now got the opportunity for Travis to be your championship winning piece that really finalizes that puzzle for you. And this Houston Texans matchup in a controlled weather environment at Houston in their stadium there is phenomenal circumstances to be in here. Now, for Etienne, this is one of the easiest matchups for opposing fantasy running backs, and with that volume we've been seeing as of late, that's really, really good stuff to see here. So hopefully that efficiency can jump to the next level here. An explosive run occurs. Hopefully he can finally get back into the end zone. One of my biggest knocks on Travis this year has been his inept ability inside of the 5-yard line. He has gotten those opportunities and those touches for this Jags offense this year since taking over the backfield, but obviously hasn't produced at a high enough clip, or at least what we were expecting him to do earlier on this season. So this is overall, though, just a dream situation and championship matchup for Travis Etienne owners. Wishing the best for you guys and hoping that not only can he surpass that double-digit threshold, which is kind of our baseline expectation for these must-start running backs each week. Wow. Hopefully he can take that next jump and a quite large jump at that into that elite territory here. Cam Akers. This is another one that I was really excited when prepping today's episode to kind of talk through some of the kind of unexpected heroes of this fantasy season. Now, whenever I talked Cam Akers this year, there was a whole lot of hate and negativity for Akers in the comment section because, to be frank, if you drafted him, it was probably a pretty rough situation, a 4th-round ADP player that really busted really bad for 60%, if not 3/4 of this entire season. But I pulled a tweet of analytics from Underdog NFL. If you guys don't follow them, they are a fantastic source of information. As always, code SFS on Underdog Fantasy Helps us out a lot here when you deposit $10 or more. I'll run just for this episode, those of you guys listening to today's video, if you head on over to Underdog Fantasy, sign up using promo code SFS, I'll give you guys the all access pass for the 2023 season. A little pre-order special here, absolutely free for helping us out there. Again, for this video only, or maybe I'll post it in the wide receiver segment as well, but that'll get you our dynasty, rookie, and redraft kits. We'll run this, till the end of the week or whatever for new signups. But again, Underdog code SFS. Regardless here, though, I did pull this tweet from Underdog, a fantastic source of information, not only for injury updates, but analytics as well on Twitter. Cam Akers has had a very poor season. However, if we go back to his Week 13 numbers going forward, he has had 156 of the team's 238 snaps to the running back position. That's a 65% offensive snap share. Really, really good numbers there. He has had 64 rushing attempts. That ranks 8th in the National Football League in that span of time. He has had 6 rushing touchdowns, which ranks 1st amongst all players. Obviously, an incredibly large needle mover there. And he has had 14 red zone carries, which ranks 4th in the league, top 5, very significant there. 5 carries inside the 5-yard line, also ranks 4th. And 78 fantasy points, which ranks 3rd. So yes, it's been brutal. He was dropped to the waivers in a majority of leagues. He was basically regarded as unstartable for quite some time, but at Los Angeles this week, a matchup that's been very, very proven to be a successful opponent for opposing fantasy running backs, Akers looks like a really solid RB2 start this week. And with, this is a streaky game that we play here. Find the hot hand, ride it. If you have the courage of your conviction to start Cam Akers, good things I would expect to come your way this week, and you could see yourself having a really good result from this matchup. Jerick McKinnon up next here. Now, this on paper doesn't seem like a great opponent, but there's a couple of things from this past Christmas weekend that I really wanted to touch on here, and not only for the Denver defensive side of things, but also for Jerick McKinnon, and essentially why I don't really view Jerick the same way that I view basically any other fantasy running back right now. And that reason is because he doesn't really play like a true running back. Even though Denver's been stout against the run this year, it doesn't really matter to me because Jerick McKinnon isn't a guy you're expecting to go out there and have an efficient yards per carry basis and be a guy that's going out there and getting goal line carries. He's not the typical player and doesn't do the typical things that you see from regular fantasy running backs. Now, Jerick McKinnon, arguably, as a 30-year-old veteran running back who has bounced his way around the National Football League in his time from San Francisco, where actually he was really largely irrelevant in his time under contract there, back to his rookie contract in Minnesota, now here to Kansas City. He's found a home and a niche role for himself here, and he's really become what I think the Chiefs hoped Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be for this team, and he's really come to fruition as a high-volume pass catcher out of the backfield. And for such an improv quarterback like Pat Mahomes, who's scrambling all over the pocket and whose legs in mobility draws the attention of linebackers who are supposed to be covering the flats, it opens up wide open space opportunities for McKinnon to make splash impact plays in the passing game. So Jerick has been that player the last 3 weeks. He has scored touchdowns. He has been very, very solid. Now, he did kind of fade off a little bit this past week. However, the point that I want to make about this Denver defense, and the last point I'll make here in favor of McKinnon, because obviously the situational role, first and foremost, is what gives him this opportunity and gives him a far higher ceiling than Isaiah Pacheco, for that matter, who is the team's official quote-unquote starter here, is that Denver's defense, I think, has finally hit the wall where their offense has been so terrible all season long that they are just gassed. Injuries have racked up, and while they might not be significant season enders for a variety of players, it's just kind of the nagging stuff. It's the mental attrition of the game that I think has caught up to this team. And you saw it on Christmas Day with Baker Mayfield's offense putting up, well, not technically their offense, but their football team led by Baker, I guess, put up 51 points. Now, some of those points were defensive because the Broncos offense has been such an atrocity. Merry Christmas to the Hackett family, unfortunately, having a firing there. I don't really want to bang on Hackett too hard because, of course, I am a shameless Green Bay Packer fan, so he obviously came from our LaFleur coaching tree, which I guess is absolutely nothing, resentment of or nothing representing a tree at this point in time. It's been one coach, but regardless here, for Jerick McKinnon and in this Kansas City offensive situation, I think you're playing against a beaten up, battered, tired Broncos defense that is just not functioning at the same level that they were earlier in the season. And as I said, I'm not really worried about McKinnon running between the tackles, because what's more valuable to our fantasy purposes here is when they get him in space, which this offense is doing at a very, very high level right now. Next up, Tyler Allgeier, Atlanta taking on the Arizona Cardinals here. What I love about this situation, and you'll hear me talk about this a lot more in the receivers episode today, but is the controlled weather environments here. A lot of dome games, warm weather games, or warmer weather in comparison to some of the Midwest and Northeastern teams that we've been seeing have freezing temperatures here as of late. But regardless, weather should play a much lower factor in these football games this week. On a wide scale basis, there'll still be your crappy games here. Regardless, though, for Allgeier, he's been putting on an absolute clinic here the last 2 weeks as kind of taking over the lead duties for this Falcons backfield. It's been Cordero Patterson fading more and more out of this offense as the lead back. I wish that they would just get him out in space and kind of flank him out as a receiver a bit more to give Desmond Ridder a little bit more help. That's a story and conversation for another time, though. The bottom line for Allgeier here is that he's just been doing really good things. He had a 59% snap share on 23 opportunities this past week against Baltimore and had back-to-back 100-plus scrimmage yardage performances. One of those games was 130-plus yards coming on the ground. So you're seeing really good stuff here. He is not the most flashy or not even close to a very explosive player. I don't think that this is a long-term solution for Atlanta's backfield, but for Week 17 fantasy football and frankly the fantasy football playoffs, Allgeier has been a fantastic stud to have on your roster. So looking forward to this Arizona Cardinal matchup, which led up an absolute field day to Tampa Bay Buccaneers running backs in a very low-scoring affair on Sunday Night Football on Christmas this past week here in the semifinals. So what you had was 30 opportunities and 162 yards for Leonard Fournette on 10 passing targets, which was ridiculous, and then 13 points fueled by a touchdown as well for Rachaad White. So lots of stuff to like here. There was plenty of production to go around for Tampa Bay running backs a week prior. This Falcons team, especially Allgeier in the run game, is playing physical football. Neither of these teams really have too much to play for, so it's just kind of a go for broke, put good tape on film type game to, hopefully hold down your job and your spot for the following season. Guys like Allgeier, Desmond Ridder are really fighting to maintain relevant roles in this offense in 2023. So there's a lot at stake for those two players. And of course, here you've got on the other side of things, Cardinals players trying to prove themselves on the defensive side and offensive side of the ball as well. So while there isn't playoff implications in this matchup, that doesn't necessarily scare me for effort level in this game. I apologize there. I had to bounce in and quickly edit the matchup for B-Rob here this week. Brian Robinson has the Cleveland Browns. This past week, he is coming off of a very, very difficult opponent in the San Francisco 49ers. Now, that has been an absolute death trap for many fantasy players and fantasy running backs in particular. I would be very alert and cautious. I'm not saying you're benching Josh Jacobs this week in Week 16 against that San Fran defense, but that is not a matchup I would be excited about having Jacobs in for this massive, pivotal, season-ending Week 17 matchup. Anyways, here, Brian Robinson against San Francisco averaged just 2.64 yards per carry against said 49ers defense on 22 rushing attempts, but the key takeaway here for me is 22 rushing attempts. Now, this Cleveland Browns defense is far less stout against the run than San Francisco is. I think it's a far better opportunity and matchup. And what the Commanders have as a game, they have a lot to play for. This team is essentially looking for a playoff spot to get in as one of the final wildcard teams. And if they lose one more matchup, they are at jeopardy of losing their spot to either Green Bay if they win out or other potential playoff scenarios for the Seahawks or Lions, who are kind of peeking their way in from the outside looking in right now. So for B-Rob in this Commanders offense, as I said, a whole lot to play for. The Browns on the other side, not so much, just really trying to establish their offensive identity for the 2023 season. Obviously, Deshaun Watson hasn't played great this year, so there's a little bit of action going on here for both sides, but at the end of the day, what I do love is the volume on the ground for Robinson. I'm expecting hopefully closer to 4 yards per carry as opposed to 2.6 that he had in Week 16 here, so if that efficiency improves, I do think this is a game as well where I like B-Rob having a shot to score a goal line touchdown or a red zone rushing attempt scoring 6 points here. So I think there's a lot to be intrigued about. So We'll recap today's picks for our Week 17 start running backs, guys I like as potential boom players this week. Etienne at Houston, love that matchup the most. Akers at Los Angeles. Actually, it's kind of an interesting shared home game between these teams. It is technically a home game for the Chargers, though. Jerick McKinnon versus Denver, Tyler Allgeier versus Arizona, and B-Rob here against the Cleveland Browns at home. So there you go, 5 matchups. As always, if you guys enjoyed, smash that like button. Stick around for more. We've got our wide receivers episode coming your way at the same time as this video. So if you're watching this episode, that video will also be live on the channel. As I said at the top of today's episode, check us out on Twitter at sizzlefantasy. That's our website, sizzlefantasy.com. Our Twitter handle is at sizzlefantasy, and the Discord server is linked in the description of today's video, as is the Twitter. So you can just check that out down there as well. One more time, I referenced the tweet from Underdog NFL today in the middle-ish of today's episode. If you want to check that out and have not signed up for Underdog already, code SFS, deposit $10 or more. When you do, you'll get a deposit match up to $100. And as I said, this week only, I'll give away the All Access Pass for next season, 2023, absolutely free here for your sign up. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.